So, as you know, today's webinar is entitled Upgrading Higher Level Student Skills, Developing an Effective Approach to Enhancing the Receptive and Productive Language Skills of C1 level students. Okay, so as usual, we're going to start today's webinar with a quote. So, when it comes to mastering a skill, is the magic ingredient. So, what do you think? So send me your ideas. Okay, Ksenia, good idea. Maybe practice, maybe. Any other ideas? Okay, revision, good. Olga, yeah, possibly. Any other ideas? Okay, learning, yeah. Okay, well, I agree with all of your answers here. Okay, they're all really good answers. The original quote, it's actually time. So time is the magic ingredient, okay? So we know in order for our higher level learners to reach C1, they have had to put in hundreds of hours of work, okay? After all this time, their productive and receptive skills are likely to be strong, okay, or relatively strong, okay? They might even be quite impressive. However, there are still areas where we can continue to push them and encourage them to keep developing these skills, okay? In today's webinar, we'll be looking at just a few activities which you can use with your higher level students to develop their listening, reading, and speaking skills, okay? We won't be focusing on writing in this webinar because my colleague Chris Kirby dedicated a whole webinar just to writing, okay, earlier this week and last week. It's a fantastic webinar. If any of you missed it, you will be able to watch it on the website shortly, okay? So I think in a week or a couple of weeks or so. So there will be a recording available of that. So we're gonna kick off today by focusing on speaking skills and pronunciation, okay? So what exactly should our C1 level students be able to do by the time they reach that level? Well, let's look at a can-do descriptor from the Central European Framework of Reference. So our C1 level students should be able to express themselves fluently, spontaneously, almost effortlessly. Okay, their speech should contain little obvious searching for expressions or avoidance strategies. So as I'm sure you know, by avoidance strategies, we mean these strategies that students use to avoid using vocabulary or grammar which maybe they don't completely understand or feel comfortable using yet, okay? For example, some students may avoid talking about particular topics if they don't have the skills or vocabulary to do so. Or maybe some students may opt to use simpler grammar constructions than a particular situation requires them to do so, okay? If they're less comfortable using more complex grammar. So we know by C1 they shouldn't be using these strategies as much. And what about pronunciation? So pronunciation, we have another can-do descriptor, but as you can see, there are two words missing. So what do we think is missing in gap A? They can vary. What do you think? So send me your answers in the chat. Okay, so it's about pronunciation. They can vary. Okay, Anastasia, okay. Excellent, yep. Okay, I've seen the correct answer there. So they can vary intonation. They can vary intonation, good. Yeah, somebody else with the correct answer. And place sentence stress, okay, correctly. So we know by the time students reach C1, yeah, they should have better control of their intonation and sentence stress. And they should also be able to incorporate more features of connected speech into their pronunciation, okay? So for example, assimilation, like linking, weak forms, okay, and maybe elision as well. As we know, this is a very important aspect of making or helping our students to develop a more natural pronunciation, maybe a more native-like pronunciation of the language, okay? So first today, we're going to look at some activities that we can use to help our students develop their pronunciation, okay? Particularly, how we can raise their awareness of these features of connected speech, okay? Before our students can incorporate these features into their own language, first we need to kind of raise their awareness of the features in other people's language, okay? So, when I do this with my students, there is a very simple activity that I use, okay? So I'm going to tell you about this activity and the procedure now. So first, I find a very, very short recording of somebody speaking to include some connected speech. Or, even easier, I find a sentence which I can read to my students in such a way that it includes some elements of connected speech. Okay. Then I tell my students to listen very carefully and to transcribe the extract or my sentence exactly as it sounds. Okay. So they don't need to use whole words. They don't even need to kind of spell the words correctly. Okay, they're writing the word as it sounds. So let me give you an example. So if we take the sentence, for example, I'm out of money, but we have to go. If I kind of read this in a more natural way, okay, including elements of connected speech, it would sound like this. I'm out of money, but we have to go. I'm out of money, but we have to go. Okay. If my students are listening carefully, they might transcribe something like this. I'm out of money, but we have to go. Okay. This is usually, quite unusual for the students, the idea of writing speech as it sounds. So I often demo this with the students, maybe a couple of times before they do it themselves. Then I give the students the transcript of the short recording or the sentence that I read to them. I then encourage them to compare the two. Through this comparison, we are able to get the students to notice certain elements of connected speech. We can then get the students to speculate about why the connected speech is in these particular kind of places. Okay. Through this discussion, we can introduce the students to these different features of connected speech. Okay, so for example, we have the linking, I'm out of money. We have the elision of T, so but, I'm out of money, but we have to, Here we have the weak form in to, so t as well. So it's a nice way to introduce these to the students. Obviously, after we've introduced them to the students, we can then get them to, we can then drill the pronunciation with them, okay, get them to actually produce it. A way that I like to use with my students is back chaining. So how many of you use back chaining with your students? So how many of you use back chain? Yeah. Anybody use back chaining when you're drilling pronunciation? Good. Yeah, Olga, so occasionally, yeah. Okay. So Those of you who aren't familiar with backchaining, this is where we drill chunks of language that gradually get bigger, okay, starting with the last word. So if I was to drill this using backchaining, it would sound like this. So, go, have to go, but we have to go. I'm out of money, but we have to go. Okay, so it's just a different way of drilling with our students. It's a good way to get them to help them with these groups of sounds, and the students seem to quite enjoy it as well. Okay, so one of the books that I really like to use for raising my students' awareness of connected speech features is Speak Out. Okay, so how many of you use Speak Out with your students? Okay, good. So I can see this is a very popular title. Yeah, so I'm sure you already know this is a great course book. Okay, so integrated into almost every lesson, they have a relevant pronunciation activity. So for example, in this functional language lesson on using vague language, we have an activity here which introduces the students to two features of connected speech, so of linking and elision. So here the students listen to some sentences from a previous activity, and they need to kind of mark in the sentences where they can hear examples of linking and elision. So a good way that we can check if our students kind of understand where connected speech is likely to occur is by giving them some new sentences and getting them to predict where connected speech features might occur. And that's exactly what they have to do next in this activity, okay, in this lesson. So we give the students some new sentences and they have to guess where or work out where the links will be. Let's focus on question 2 here. So which words do you think will be linked together if we read this in a natural way? So what do you think? Okay, so send me your answers. Good, I agree. Anastasia, yeah. Olga, good. So yeah, I think if we're reading this in a natural way, we'd have looks about, subout. Good. I would always say, yeah, also say maybe about 50. So it's about 50. Okay. So again, we omit the T here. So yeah, I think almost all of you had the correct answers there. So she looks about 50 or so. So of course, after this activity, we can then drill the pronunciation with the students again. So these activities are great because we are developing the students' receptive skills and also productive skills. We are familiarizing them with the sound of these features and also helping them to incorporate them into their own language as well. So as we mentioned earlier, by the time students reach C1, they should also be able to alter where they place the stress in a sentence to enhance the meaning, or sometimes even change the meaning completely. Okay, so when I want to raise my students' awareness of the power of changing sentence stress, okay, I use an activity called It's Not What You Say, It's How You Say It. Okay, so it's a long name for the activity, I know. It's a very simple activity. Okay, basically, I read a sentence to the students. For example, I didn't steal your bike. And I don't put the stress on any particular word. Then I get the students to listen again while I place the stress on different words. The students need to try and interpret how this changes the meaning. So, for example, how does it change the meaning if I say, I didn't steal your bike? So how does it change the meaning? So I didn't steal your bike. Okay. Yeah. So I would agree, Katerina, that by changing the stress there, it's like, I didn't steal it. Maybe I borrowed it. Or then, I could change it, put the stress on bike. So I didn't steal your bike. Okay. I didn't steal your bike. Maybe I stole something else. Okay. So we introduce the students to this idea through maybe a few example sentences. Then we put the students into pairs and give them some new sentences, okay, to read to each other. So one student reads the sentence, placing the stress on different words, while the other listens and tries to interpret how it changes the meaning. We can extend it or make it more challenging by getting the students to think of their own sentences, okay? They then change the stress while another listens and interprets how it changes the meaning. Again, as I said before, it's just a very simple activity just to raise the students' awareness of the importance of sentence stress, okay? So, we've looked at pronunciation. How can we now develop our students' kind of actual speaking skills? As we discussed in the previous webinar in this series, a very challenging aspect of teaching higher level students is that they often overuse many of the same words, okay? So because they've been using the language for a long time, they become overly dependent sometimes on the same words, okay? They focus more on fluency and as a result, become over dependent on certain words, okay? But the fact is, students do have a fantastic passive vocabulary by this level, okay? The real challenge is getting the students to put some of it into active use, okay? To tap into this fantastic resource they have. But as we know, a lot of students at this level don't, okay? They overuse the same phrases. And this results in their speaking sounding sometimes a bit boring or even repetitive. Doesn't reflect the true extent of their lexical knowledge. For example, maybe let's think about discussions that you have with some of your higher level students. Are there any phrases that they really overuse when they are giving their opinions? So, good. So some of you said about the lexical teddy bears. So some of you that attended my last webinar, thank you. Good. I agree. So, I think. So we know our students, even very strong students, I disagree, I think. So of course, one way we can get our students to start speaking in a much more interesting way, to make them sound a lot more articulate, is by encouraging them to tap into this huge passive vocabulary and get them to increase the range of functional language that they are using, okay? As I'm sure you know, by functional language, I mean the languages that we use for fulfilling a particular purpose, okay? Like giving an opinion. So what are some maybe more interesting phrases that we could use for giving our opinion. So what do you think? What are some more interesting phrases we could use? Yeah, in my opinion is okay. Yeah, it can be overused by some students, but yeah, to my mind, okay. If you ask me, nice, yeah. So yeah, we've got a few examples here. So of course, we can get the students to look at lists of functional language in the course books. Okay, that's fine, but maybe a more engaging way is to get the students to generate their own lists of functional language. Remember, they have this fantastic passive vocabulary. We just need to get them to actually to use it, okay, to put it into active use. So when I want my students to generate a list of functional language, an activity that I like to use with them is competitive brainstorming. So this works for any area of functional language or any area of vocabulary, in fact. So, competitive brainstorming. For this, first, we choose a particular area, maybe of vocabulary, or here, like functional language. So phrases for agreeing. Then I put the students into pairs or small teams. Okay, I give them a time limit, maybe 1 minute, to brainstorm as many phrases as they can for fulfilling this function. At the end, I get them to report back to the class, okay? But the students only get a point if they say a phrase which isn't on the list of the other teams, okay? This is to really encourage the students to delve deep into their passive vocabulary, to think of less common, more advanced language, okay? It's to get them to be more adventurous, to take a few more risks with it, okay? Of course, we can write all of the phrases down, but okay, it's better if we can get them to use, to think of these more advanced phrases. Of course, then we can supplement the lists that the students generate with phrases from the functional language lists in the book, okay? Then, yeah, we can get them to repeat it for different areas of functional language before they start a discussion or role play, okay? Or we can do it as a stage after they've done a discussion or role play, okay? Maybe the first time they do the discussion or role play, maybe, yeah, we can highlight the fact that they used the same phrases and then do this competitive brainstorming, yeah, to get them to realize they need to be using a range of language. But we know it's all well and good, you know, getting the students to develop, to generate these fantastic lists of language, but we still can't guarantee they will use it in their discussion. I remember years ago, so when I was a new teacher, there was nothing more frustrating than teaching a whole functional language lesson with higher level students to then have at the end of the lesson, the students still use the same phrases that they came into the lesson knowing, okay? So we need to kind of find a way to get the students to use some of these phrases, to use a wider range. One way we can do that is through functional language cards, okay? So we, on slips of paper, we write the phrases that we want the students to use. They can be phrases from their generated lists, okay? Or alternatively, we can get the students to write them themselves, okay? Then that saves us a job, okay? Then the students hold the phrases, yeah? And then during a role play or a discussion, once they have used one of the phrases, they can put it down, okay? So they'd have to try and put down all of the phrases during their discussion. So the winning student can be the one that manages to put down the most phrases. So I find with students of all ages, sometimes even particularly my adult students, injecting a bit of competition into the activity makes it a lot more engaging. Yeah, they can get very competitive sometimes. Okay. So another activity that we can use is challenge cards. So again, we put the phrases on slips of paper. We put particular communicative challenges that the students need to try and fulfill during a particular activity. Okay, so we can make these once and then use them for many different classes. Okay, of course, at the moment, we don't want our students kind of all touching the same pieces of paper for obvious reasons. And also some of us are obviously teaching online at the moment because of the situation that is ongoing. So a way that I have adapted this to some of my online classes is by, well, I project all of the challenges on the screen, okay? Or in the classroom, I project it up on the screen. I give each challenge a number, okay? I then ask the students to roll a digital dice, okay? We can find a digital dice by Googling the words roll dice, okay? You can try it now, yeah? Yeah, then I ask the students to roll their digital dice 3 times. They get 3 numbers, yeah? The numbers they get correspond with the challenges that they have to fulfill, they have to complete during their discussion. Okay, so as I said, it's a simple activity. It's just to get them to focus more on using this wider range of language, making their kind of speaking much more interesting and more in keeping with, you know, this C1 level, which they're supposed to be. Okay. So we've looked at developing speaking skills. What about listening skills? Okay. So what should our C1 level students be able to do? Well, let's look at another can-do descriptor. So you'll notice there's another word missing here. So what do we think is the missing word? So C1 students should be able to understand enough to follow extended speech on abstract and complex topics beyond their own field, though they may need to confirm occasional details, especially if the is unfamiliar. Okay, so we've got topic, good guess. Context, possibly, Ksenia, yeah. Subject, idea. Lots of good guesses, but the correct answer is actually accent. Okay, so if the accent is unfamiliar, so a very important aspect of developing our higher level students' listening skills is exposing them to a wider range of different accents. Okay, this is a way that we can really challenge our higher level students and to encourage them to continue to really develop these skills. Okay, so in the world, there are 380 million native speakers of English. Do we know how many people speak English as a second or third language? Okay, any ideas? Any ideas? Okay, maybe double. Okay, 5 times more. I think Anna, you're close. Yeah, you are close. So there are, yeah, over 1 billion. Yeah, so I can tell you there are 1.27 billion people in the world that use and can use English. Okay, so it's entirely possible that our higher level students will be using English with native speakers, in their academic, professional, or personal lives. However, it's probably much more likely that they will be using English with people who speak it as a second language. Okay. Consequently, our higher level students need to be able to kind of understand or ready to deal with people who use quite a range of different accents. Okay. So, of course, we know that one way we can expose our students to a wider range of accents is through the use of authentic recordings. So videos on YouTube, videos in the course books, such as Speak Out, or webinars even. So we know that's a good way to give our students more exposure. But sometimes exposure isn't enough to really develop our students' understanding. Okay. If we want to really raise our students' awareness of a particular accent, sometimes we need to get them to examine it in more detail. So if I want my students to focus on a particular accent, this is the procedure that I use. Okay. So first, I find a recording of a speaker using the accent. Okay. Then, of course, we want to generate interest in the recording before we show it to our students. Okay. So we can do this by asking our students some discussion questions, maybe connected to the topic of the recording. Okay. Then we want them to develop an understanding of the content. Okay. So as we know, we can do this, by maybe asking our students a couple of general comprehension questions to answer while they are listening. Maybe then we want them to develop a more detailed understanding of the content. We can do that by showing them the recording again, asking them some more detailed comprehension questions, or asking them to listen for more detail to support their answers from the first time they watched it. So after we've focused on the content, then we want the students to really focus on the different features of this accent. Okay. So what I do is I obviously watch the video before the students, and I find some words that the speaker uses in the recording, which really kind of demonstrates certain aspects of their accent. So I write them on the board, and I tell the students, when you watch again, pay attention for these words. How does the speaker pronounce them? So then I play the video again, or recording, sorry, okay, and get the students to focus on these particular words. I then put the students into pairs or small groups and get them to discuss how the speaker's pronunciation of these words compares to their own. Okay, so they can contrast their pronunciation with the speaker's. Okay. Then we can discuss it as a class. You can help them with their understanding. But then we give the students some new words that they haven't heard the speaker say yet. So maybe we know the speaker uses these later in the recording, okay, that we've chosen. So we give the students these new words and get them to predict how they think the speaker will pronounce them based on the patterns that they've identified. Okay, but we don't confirm if they're correct yet. Okay, we let the students watch the short record or the next part. So we let the students watch the next part of the video or recording to check if their predictions were correct. And then finally, yeah, it's nice to end this kind of activity with a kind of some reflection and discussion. Okay, get the students to think about why it's important to raise their awareness of different accents. Okay, so like I said, it's quite a simple activity, yeah, but it usually works quite well. My students have enjoyed this, particularly focusing on certain accents which they feel that they are going to need, like for further study. Okay, depending on which countries they might be planning to study in. Okay, so as I said earlier, yeah, a book that I really like to use with my higher level learners is Speak Out. I really like Speak Out Advanced Plus because they have these really nice kind of interviews with speakers of different nationalities. So we don't need to go looking on YouTube to find recordings of speakers using different accents, because we have a great resource here in the book. So I'm going to show you a short video, or parts of a video from Speak Out Advanced Plus. And I would like you to listen to how many different accents can you hear. Okay. And also, if you think you're able to, what accents can you hear? Okay, so is there a Spanish person speaking English? Is there maybe is there an American person speaking English? Okay, so let's watch the video. How many different accents can you hear? Okay, so one moment. Okay.
So, tell me about a teacher that has inspired you.
A teacher who inspired me, well, that would actually be my German teacher, which might sound weird, but let's see if I can explain this. She inspired me to always think ahead instead of just looking at today. So she inspired me to think ahead and also to use whatever I had, which actually made me quite good at German, even if we are talking English now.
Well, this year at university I had this intellectual property professor. I'm a law student here in London, and I would say that intellectual property is quite a challenging subject, but he managed to make it incredibly accessible to us in the way that he taught, because he was so passionate about how he did it, and he made it very interesting. You know, he never just taught us what you needed to know. He always managed to twist it in some way that would kind of inspire us to be passionate about it.
Well, I remember my teacher, my professor in my MA studies. I was studying applied linguistics and psychology of second language acquisition and bilingualism. He's a great person. He is the can-do. He's got the can-do attitude, and he makes you really feel that you can do it. He never says that this is difficult or this is not relevant or whatever. So once, like, he gave me that kind of like feeling of like really of being passionate about what you're doing. So this is what I always remember about my MA studies.
Well, I study development studies, and one of my teachers, who is very inspiring, he's inspiring because he has done a lot of field work himself.
Okay, so as I said, we're only watching part of the video. The video does have more at the beginning and at the end as well. So how many different accents did you hear there? Yeah, kind of three or four. I mean, we can make it more challenging, obviously, for the students by, just playing them the recording. Okay, it's a bit easier when we can see, the people, so we know their different accents. Yeah, good. So somebody noticed, maybe the first gentleman, that was a German person speaking English. Yeah. Any other accents that maybe you heard there? So I think that the possibly French, yeah, I would agree. I think maybe French. I think actually the last lady or last girl who spoke there, I think she's Hungarian. And the only way that I know that is because I worked in Hungary for many years before I moved to Kiev. So I think from the name and also the pronunciation, I think she's Hungarian, actually. So yeah, as we can see, yeah, in the book, we've got these great videos that we can use to raise our students' awareness of different accents, and expose them to a wider range of accents. And as you can see, the topic that they are talking about is quite engaging as well. Okay, I enjoyed watching this video. I found it very interesting myself as well. So, as we spoke about in the last webinar, another very important aspect of developing an effective approach to teaching higher level students is enabling them to work more independently as well. Okay, so we know that this is a very important aspect of enabling our higher level students to really continue to progress, to continue to develop, to help them avoid hitting a kind of plateau with their development. So that's why now we're going to look at how we can help our students to develop their listening skills independently. Okay, so students, higher level students, are in the great position of being able to listen to or watch videos in English that they would choose to do so in their first language as well. Okay, but it's one thing watching or listening to a video in English for enjoyment. It's another thing if the student is doing this to really develop their language skills. Okay, so when I'm aware that some of my students are doing this to develop their language skills, I usually give them a framework to help them to do this. Okay, I give them a framework to help them take a much more focused and structured approach to developing these listening skills and maybe their vocabulary as well. So I always tell my students that they should really, only focus on a short length clip. Maybe 5 or 10 minutes is enough. I tell them that they should try and listen or watch this clip 3 times. Okay, the first time that they listen to it, they should be focusing on the content. Okay, so what is the topic that the speakers are talking about? Yeah, what is the meaning of what they're saying? Okay, then I ask them to listen again. This time they're focusing on the actual vocabulary connected to this topic. Okay, third time they listen, I said they should be focusing on this functional language. Okay, the phrases they hear the speakers using to move the discourse forwards, move the conversation forwards, or to kind of interact. Okay, so then I say obviously the students can look up the meaning of these phrases, or they can bring them in and we can discuss the meaning together. But when I've asked my students to do this, I always give them some time in class to then present their findings to either a partner or maybe the rest of the class. Okay, so they can tell their partner about these the language that they have learned from this particular recording. Okay, again, they don't actually have to do this in class. You can encourage them to do this outside of class as well. If some of your students spend time together outside of class, also they can do it if they are linked kind of online through for example, Telegram or something like that. Okay. So I always find with my students that they really enjoy doing this. They enjoy having the opportunity to teach their partner some language that is interesting maybe for them, from a recording that they have chosen, Okay, so they usually enjoy this and find it quite engaging. Also, through the process of teaching others, they are developing their own and deepening their own understanding of the language as well. So we've looked at a couple of activities we can use for listening. What about reading now? Okay, so what again should our higher level students be able to do? Yeah, in regard to their reading skills. Okay, well, again, we have another can-do descriptor here. So again, there's a word missing. What do you think is the missing word? So C1 students should be able to understand a wide range of demanding longer texts and recognize meaning. Okay, good, fantastic. Lots of correct answers there, so thank you, everyone. Yeah, implied or implicit meaning. Okay, so by implicit meaning, yeah, we mean this kind of meaning that the writer is kind of suggesting or implying, but maybe not explicitly stating. Okay, it is the ability for our students to read in between the lines to see what a writer is really saying. Okay, so yeah, how can we help our students to develop these inferential kind of reading skills? How can we encourage them to look at texts in more depth, to kind of read in between the lines? Well, just one way that I like to use with my students is by introducing them to more euphemisms. Okay, so euphemisms, as I'm sure you know, these are kind of less direct, more vague, or more polite phrases that our students that we use in place of more embarrassing or offensive or direct language. Okay, so we use these a lot in English. Okay, so as you know, English people have this reputation for being very polite, yeah, for being very nice. Okay, part of the reason for that is because of the number of euphemisms that we use. Okay, so I can tell you a secret. We still talk about embarrassing and horrible things, but it's not always easy to notice because we use so many of these euphemisms. Okay, so let's look at a few examples together. So here is a commonly used one. We are going to be doing some restructuring soon. So if your manager says this to you, is it good news or bad news? Yeah, very good. Anastasia, yeah, good. Katerina, this is bad news. So this means that the company is having some problems and they're probably going to have to lay you off or maybe make some redundancies. Okay, but it's a nicer way. Well, a nicer way or a more indirect way of saying it. Here we have another one. So I can't attend as I'm experiencing some negative cash flow at the moment. Again, what does it mean if I say negative cash flow? Yeah, good, Ksenia. It's maybe short of money or broke. Okay, so if we're introducing the students to a phrase, a euphemism like this, get them to think about why is the person using it. So why has the writer used this in their letter, for example? Get them to think deeper. Think of the motivation of the writer. Okay. One more classic one. The manager can be a bit economical with the truth sometimes. So yeah, what type of person is he? Good, yeah, Anastasia, good, yes. So he is a liar, okay? So again, this is maybe a more delicate way of saying that somebody is a liar, okay? So by introducing our students to more euphemisms, okay, we are kind of encouraging them to read between the lines, to look below the surface meaning of a text, encouraging to think about the motivation of the writers as well. Okay, an activity that we can use with our students with this is to give the students some euphemisms, okay, to look at in groups and get them to try and interpret what they mean. Okay, we can then extend it and make it more challenging by getting our students to think of their own euphemisms. Okay, they can think of their own euphemisms and then maybe pass them to another group, and the other group has to try and interpret what they are trying to say. We can give it more structure by giving the students maybe uncomfortable topics that they have to try and talk about, and then they think of their own euphemisms to do so. Okay. So another way that we can encourage our students to develop these inferential reading skills is by getting them to try and work out the attitudes of particular writers based on the word choices that they have made. Okay, so we get the students to focus on particular words and the connotations of these words. So as you know, we talked about this in more detail in the last webinar in this series. Okay, one way we can raise our students' awareness of the different connotations of words is through a synonym brainstorm. So this is when we are looking at a text with students and we encounter a word that we know has some different synonyms. Okay, we can then elicit these synonyms from the students and have a discussion about the different connotations of them. Okay, so are they positive or are they negative? Okay, then we can have a further discussion with the students about why they think the writer has chosen a word with this particular connotations instead of one of the other options. Okay, so as we know, it doesn't need to be a whole kind of activity in itself. Okay, this can be just an extra stage that we include as a follow-up, maybe after students have looked at a text in the book, maybe. So we don't need to find texts especially for this. It's just kind of something to raise our students' awareness of this, these clues that can help them to infer the meaning of a text, help them read in between the lines. So just two simple ways that we can encourage our students to develop these skills. Another reading skill, which is very important for students of all levels to develop, is the ability to infer the meaning of new words. Okay, so as we know, this is an incredibly powerful tool in our students' kind of linguistic toolbox. Okay, so if they are able to infer the meaning of new words, okay, this allows them to expand their own vocabulary, and also it helps them to remove barriers to their understanding or enjoyment of texts that they are reading. Okay, but I tend to find that often many teachers, when we ask our students to infer the meaning of a new word, we say, use the context. Okay, infer the meaning from the context. Okay, it's very simple to say that, but in reality, okay, we're kind of simplifying what is quite still a difficult process. Okay, so just as a bonus today, because this isn't just for higher level students, this is really for maybe any level from kind of pre-intermediate upwards. This is the kind of systematic approach that I teach my higher level students. Okay, so by giving them a systematic approach, they can take a more structured approach to looking for the clues in the text and in the word that they can then use to work out the meaning of the word. So my systematic approach is the Twitter approach. Okay, so each one of these letters stands for a different clue that our students can look for in the text or in the words to help them work out the meaning. So the T, what could the T stand for? What clue can help them work out the meaning?